Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. We focus on Tuesdays on audio. And today we'll be talking about audio plugins. What plugins do we actually use? Which ones do we think that we should get? It's Black Friday, so a lot of us are thinking about all the plugins we might buy. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Tomorrow, $20,000 studio. Now, we had this discussion a little earlier, like what would you spend if you just had a raw space of, let's say, 20 by 30 feet? What would you build? So think about that, and we'll brainstorm that tomorrow. 2 hours of extra, just 2 hours of Q&A on Thursday. It's Turkey Day for us here in the United States, and so we're going to take it a little easier. And then on Friday, we'll be brainstorming about second hours. The second hours for December are already shaping up to be pretty nifty, but we'll talk about things that we'd like to see, things that we'd like to cover. And then Saturday, of course, is the long day. We'll have education at 8 o'clock. We don't broadcast that, so you have to be here in Zoom. And then at noon, Damayanti Gajar is taking a couple of weeks off, and at noon, we will be going back to Belfast to the Accidental Theatre, and we'll be taking over again. So you can see the behind the scenes. There's a link in the emails that go out every morning on how to get into that and see the behind the scenes there. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
First one comes from our own Chris Fenwick here in the panel. And Chris asks, if you're crazy enough to use a Blackmagic 6K Pro as a webcam, is it possible to just turn off the rear display to avoid burning anything in on a display that is just pushed up against a wall?
Go ahead, Jason.
I am absolutely crazy enough to use a Blackmagic 6K Pro. In fact, that's what I'm coming in on right now. And yeah, they thought of that. There's a setting that that basically just says dim the screen after a minute.
I'm glad you said that because I didn't know that, and mine's been sitting there for a long time. It hasn't burned in.
And so is mine.
It hasn't burned in, but I haven't. I walk by it all the time and go, "Oh, the camera's
upgrade
on."
the firmware. I think they added it.
Oh, they added it. Okay, I might have an older one, so we'll take a look. Good question. Good answer. All right, next question.
Next one up comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, after last weekend's Belfast show, I was on the audio team. One issue was losing track of who was in control at any given time. Is positive exchange of control, you have the con or you have control, I have control, used a lot in our industry?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm
sorry,
Sky. I shouldn't be on that one.
Go ahead, Sky.
I would say no, because traditionally you don't, unless you're going from one state to another state to another state, as far as, where the game is being, presented from, you only have one crew doing one thing at like a basketball game or a football game. So that's kind of a unique circumstance.
We do it a lot especially when we're not in the same place. So we'll say, "Hey, do you have this? I have this," and there's a call and confirmation. It's something that's pretty common on our end because we're not sitting right next to each other, and sometimes even when we're sitting next to each other, we do it. You definitely, anything that matters, you want to have kind of a hard handoff. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and he says, updates to YouTube's terms of service were announced for January 5th, 2022. Will we see any real impact to streaming from the changes?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It's basically what they're just updating all the terms of services and the transparency, what to expect and things like that. The one thing that I'm really hoping that they've really looked into and they've talked about there is the fact that they'll actually tell you what's going on, because there's been a lot of times that they've made changes, especially to live, where they made it and then they said what was going on, and now they're saying, hey, we'll tell you before we start implementing those changes. So hopefully that transparency is going to work a little bit better. But other than that, it's just a lot of terms of update, terms of use, and about copyright strikes, adding in what you did wrong when they do give you a copyright strike and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of us have run into is YouTube penalizing us. Interesting. YouTube penalizing us, but not telling us why. Like not saying, like it just says, well, we can't do that, and so that's I think that's the challenge on our end. Yeah. So next question.
James Hutchinson of Dublin, Ireland is up next, and he says, if not too personal a question, what does Rupert have in the storage containers behind him, and how many are there?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I got a whole bunch of stuff. So I actually just had to count them. There's 20 in each of the sections that you see. So there's a total of 80 of those totes across that back wall there. But I also have another section back here and a whole other section in the cupboard to the side there. But I've got adapters, little bits of networking gear, little pieces of hardware, grips and clamps, and all kinds of little odds and odds and pieces that are helpful to put a kit together or set up together, or just be able to do things quickly. But one of the most important ones is the snacks tote. That's pretty important. And
Rupert's just way more organized than the rest of us. We just had piles, and he just has nice little boxes.
I will get around to doing. I've decided against labeling, because I think the labeling will actually obscure the because they're transparent. You can see through them, and that's more helpful than labels, I find. And I will do a guided tour one of these days.
That's great. We definitely need that. Go ahead, Chris.
Maybe instead of labels, Rupert, you could have like an AR view. I still say it looks like Legos to me.
Go ahead, David.
Or even just illuminate them. Have it all key stream deck, so you can say, "Oh, I need this adapter," and it'll light up the box and extract it.
Absolutely. Next question.
James Hutchinson, Dublin, Ireland. Again, this time he says, "I broke Zoom ISO by changing settings on the Zoom US backend. One change required participants to upgrade their version of Zooms. This stops Zoom ISO from opening meetings. Turning off the feature does not fix it. Has anybody else experienced this?"
I don't know if anyone. Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, we were discussing this morning. Andy said that there was some serious issues with it. I've been looking for that feature in the back end, and I can't figure out what to call it to search for it and find it. But I think I need to turn it off, because I really need Zoom ISO to work for me.
And the I don't quite understand.
This is what James said this morning. He said when you force the update, which we know is a feature that we
like
use.
I like.
Yeah, you like it.
I like it.
What happens is Zoom ISO has a version of Zoom built into it, kind of, like,
and it can't update.
And it can't update. So what James implied this morning, and I could be wrong, is that even if he goes and turns off that feature, he's now broken Zoom ISO from being able to sign in to his meetings that are created on that account.
Because he moved it forward.
And apparently he wasn't able to actually move it back, which is the real problem.
I'm glad that I haven't pushed it lately. So I haven't pushed mine forward lately. So what happens is when you set up Zoom in Zoom's back end, you can say what the minimum requirement is. And I haven't seen a lot of features that I felt like, I have to force everybody towards. And so I just kind of have left it alone for the last 3 or 4 months.
Right.
And I think maybe we just lucked out that I did that, because oftentimes I go, there's a new update. And I wait, there was one time where I updated it the day I was like, I'm just going to push everybody straight up to the new one, because there was some feature that I wanted to make sure that everybody had. And of course, Oh No I Know had an event the next day, and it was chaos, because there was suddenly a whole bunch of stuff didn't work. So I've stopped forcing that update past 3 or 4 months ago. So it is a dangerous tool, one that I've campaigned hard for, but still a dangerous tool to have there. Yeah. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Next, looking at my next camera purchase, preferably a pair of cameras with 10x optical zoom capable of HDMI a must. SDI would be nice too, and they have to be networkable NDI or other to be used in my alternative workflow. 2K per or less. Any budget suggestions?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I was trying to pull it up real quick, but I couldn't get it fast enough. There was an IBC announcement for an NDI head. So it's basically not the camera, but if you have a camera that you want to put on top that may be less expensive, like in the $1,000 range, there's finally a way to use NDI to move that camera around. It's by a company called Salray Works, and it's not on their website yet, but it is interesting technology, because I've been waiting for something like that. They had a bigger one that was super expensive that held monster, broadcast size cameras. That was really neat, but it wasn't over NDI. That one was traditional IP, like Visca control. So I'd be looking at that. I wouldn't buy anything until that fully went out on their website and take a look at it and see what other people are saying about it. That would be my suggestion.
Next question.
Comes from our own Sky Gleeson here in the panel, and Sky is concerned in Seattle, Washington. What MacBook Pro did Jason purchase, and why does he love it, and what is he using it for?
Go, Jason.
Oh, wow. Those are a lot of questions. Well, on the day that it came out, I got the brand new MacBook Pro, and it is the M1 Max, and it's 64 gigs of RAM and 2 terabyte hard drive, and it is absolutely amazing.
I'm going to put you on the ropes here. I'm going to ask you, is this the fastest MacBook that Apple's ever made?
For the stuff we care about, I don't know. I don't know. I think the verdict is still out here, Alex. You know, we've only seen 50,000 YouTube videos of people going, "Whoa!"
No, the only reason I ask is that it's just like when Apple says this is the fastest computer we've ever made, I'm kind of like I'm just waiting for some year where it says, well, it's really easier to use, but it's really, you know, we didn't do as well this year.
This is the most mediocre MacBook we've ever done.
We
I
fell
would buy that
backwards a little bit.
computer day one if they said, it's pretty good. We've had better.
Yeah, we've had better, but the new keyboard is amazing. You know, like or something like that. You know, it's shiny. You know, I'm just waiting for that. Every time they say this is the best Mac ever, the fastest phone ever, you're like, of course it is. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be releasing it
until next year.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, what does it mean to fax out a production? Is that term still used even if a fax machine is not?
I don't think a fax was. Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think that was something Doug Ferguson mentioned. I'm not going to say what he meant exactly by that, but just in terms of fax in general, you know, it still does come up from time to time. Once a year, somebody will mention it, maybe twice a year, you know, wanting to fax something or wanting to be faxed something. I do keep an eFax subscription lingering in the background because just in those odd cases it comes up. If you're the guy in a group that can solve that problem, then it gets you over that hurdle. So it can be quite useful.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so to fax out a production has nothing to do with a fax machine. It's a facilities check. Have you wired and checked out everything as per the request in the documentation that's come from the producer? So in sports, when you fax out your truck, you check all the cameras. Do the cameras actually appear on the appropriate buttons? Do everybody's tally lights flicker on and off when you switch between everything? Do their returns work? Do they have a switched return? Do they have a program return? And do all the audio mics make it in? So a fax check is, are the facilities up to snuff and ready to start your show?
And it can be a very intricate process. Like for a large show, this might take an hour and a half, 2 hours of faxing all the cameras and all the playbacks and all the bits and pieces.
What was annoying in the sports world is because you went through the same stuff every day with this crew,
right?
They knew exactly which question you were going to ask them next.
Right.
And they would go, yep, it's switching, yep. And like right before you'd ask them.
And a proper one is not ask them what it is, but see, so what you'll hear is like when you're seeing a big truck do it, you'll hear, you know, camera 15, now cut to camera 2, camera 15, because you're looking at, do those two cameras line up in color? Do they line up in framing? Okay, now show this graphic, now show this graphic, now show this overlay, now show this thing. And so you're at the director, when they're faxing through it for a lot of this stuff, is asking you to do something they're going to see whether it works or not. The mistake that is made is when people say, is it working? You know, is that working down the path? You want to force it to do, you basically want to what we call interrogate the system. You know, and interrogating the system means you're going to show me something that proves that thing is where it works. And even things like when you're faxing out like comms, you'll say, you know, you might have a couple different channels and you'll say, you hear me here, you don't hear me here. And the person will just, you don't hear me here, you hear me here. And they go, yes, you know, and they'll go, you know, like they'll only talk when they hear you. And then you know that you're sending the right channels to them, but all of those things have to be some return back to the person accountable. That's the full fax is finding a way to do that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you guys have covered most of it. It's just considered a dress rehearsal for the show, including blowing the cobwebs out of all the interconnects, all the pipelines and interconnections.
And normally we would fax before we did the rehearsal. Like, that's what you want to do is you want to fax the whole system and then you do the rehearsal, assuming that the fax was successful. Next question.
Next one, oh dear, we have a serious note. Guy Cochran reminds us. He says, I've been asked by those that knew him to relay this information to office hours. Our friend Patrick Dolan, often seen in after hours and frequent questioner, has passed. May we please have a moment of silence in remembrance?
Yeah, we'll take a moment of silence.
Thank you.
And do we know if there's anything that is needed for his live stream? Is that also, Guy, do you know have any other information?
It looks like it's going to be done at his church.
Okay.
But he is in the biz. Like I was a camera op for the company, freelance for the company that he worked for. And so they're set. They have a lot of stuff.
Right. He'll be missed. All right. Next question.
Moving on, Jeffrey Powers is up next from Madison, Wisconsin, and he says, I used my portal to try and upgrade a call. It didn't switch to 720 until the host started recording. Is the portal hack still valid?
Interesting that it didn't start until the recording started.
Yeah, it was wild. It was like I was turning on and off the portal just to figure out what was going on, and it just stayed at 640, and then I ended up turning the portal off, and then they started the meeting. They started the event, hit the record button, and everything just bumped up to 720. It was wild.
I will say that it does seem like a hack. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets unhacked. Just that doesn't work anymore. It seems kind of like a little bit of a workaround that they kind of didn't look the other way for a while. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it anymore. Next question.
Mitchell Hill is in from Wilmington, Delaware, and he says Blackmagic recently announced that Resolve 17.4 is 5 times faster on a Mac M1 Silicon. What's next?
Go ahead, Jason.
So, I can speak generally about this. I think they had a little bit of a head start. They were working very carefully with Apple. But who knows if they knew exactly what they were targeting for. But these insane increases are just, they're finishing out of their implementation that conforms to the Apple hardware model that that they've been planning for. So my guess is they're going to keep going, and it's probably not going to be a 5x increase, for the next 6 months. But it's pretty good.
I think most of the software companies that are seeing these huge gains are people who are already they were already taking advantage of what Apple was telling them for the last 5 years to write to Metal, to write to the libraries that they're giving them, telling them that things are going to keep changing, and the only way for you to keep up. They couldn't tell them what it was. And I think that what we saw was not so much they got a little bit of a head start, but they took the steps that were necessary. And you're seeing the same thing with Maxon. They took the steps that were necessary over years, because it takes years to move your graphics processing to something that's going to take full advantage of the hardware. And so, they're benefiting from it. Companies that didn't do that, even especially in the audio, are going to have it's going to take them a lot longer to catch up. Go ahead, Alex.
And the other thing is that Resolve has one of the newest code. They added the NLE part of Resolve more recently than Final Cut Pro 10 was being coded, so it's the newest one. So they're able to live in the modern world of even past the GPU age of the 2007, 2008. So they're much more ready in that respect.
Absolutely. Next question.
Sky Gleason back again from Seattle. Black Friday, best websites for gear, hardware, software, lights, gaff, the things that we'll need for Office Hours 2.0.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll start it off with one of our very near and dear to our hearts one, Rogue Amoeba. And if you look at the audio section in Mukana, I put a deal in there yesterday.
Great. Sky?
Last year, Jeffrey had some really great sites, and I bought a lot of stuff that I needed because I was completely deficient. Now, I don't know if I need to duplicate that piece of equipment, but I remember there was a C-stand for like $75. I'm using it almost every day. It's amazing. So I guess I'm looking for those.
Now, where
treasures.
did you get the C-stand?
Jeffrey, where was that?
Jeffrey sold it to you?
No.
Well, it's
recommended it.
since I'm an Amazon influencer, it was on Amazon, and Newer's got the C-stands, and they are on sale again. I just saw a knockdown on Sunday, so I'm expecting Black Friday deals on that. So
I've never seen a C-stand with its own carrying bag, and you think how silly until you have it.
Yeah, it's super useful.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I guess I'm looking for, those treasures. Who else?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sammy's Camera has their Black Friday sale up today, so they have all kinds of lenses and cameras and lighting gear and etc. So you can peruse there. I think the sale has already started, so you can look there.
That's great. Yeah, we'll probably keep tracking that this week, especially on Friday. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia, is up next. If Loopback is the best, I'm sorry. The first one of his is, I created a business page on Facebook yesterday for Conversations with Tony Mobley, asking the panel to make suggestions to improve that page. So that's what he's looking for today. Suggestions.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, there are different opportunities as well as limitations on your business page in Facebook. And as far as where do you stream things live to, et cetera. So I just remember that there were some differences between a personal page and a business page. So just know that there are differences that you want to start researching. Good question.
Go ahead, Tony.
I just wanted to say, I'm totally out of my element with this. And so I need any suggestions and help with this. I'm not sure I've gotten some engagement from people coming from the personal page over to the business page, but I am out of my element. So help.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
You said it best. You're out of, if you're out of your element, then the best thing to do is just to have the page, have it set up, but you keep your focus on where you really want the people to be driving from. If it's YouTube right now, get YouTube up and running. You have the Discord, up and running, and then get to Facebook when you can get to Facebook. If you have somebody that's dedicated that can help you with that, then that's a different story. But if you're planning to do any type of dual streaming to Facebook, yeah, you'll have to add to stuff like that. But it's just another thing to add to your plate, and that can get kind of tough when you're trying to build a show.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if you have time, Tony, I know time's a commodity, but Facebook loves little snippets like bite-sized info. So if there's some pieces that you can go back to where somebody said something really special that's shareable, I would do like a nice big piece of print at the top, or maybe even transcribe below, because a lot of people on Facebook are standing in line and they're flipping through. So like half the people are on mobile flipping through and they want fast, bite-sized content. So if you can just give them little pieces and then other people can share it out, that'll boost the algorithm. And then just go live in there too. If you can have Aaron push the 1080p feed in there, so while you're live, that'll also pop up potentially in the feed, especially if other people share it, the more the merrier. So I gave it a like and suggested in Mukana for everybody else to do the same.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, continue to think of all of these locations as places for, it's a funnel. You're driving, Jeffrey's word, driving people towards a thing. And so that's where, if you only have people's attention for how long, what does that platform, like on the side of a bus, you only have 3 seconds. So you don't want a lot of heavy text. So keep that in mind in these different platforms. Who's your audience? What do you want them to do? And you're driving them towards your show on Wednesday.
Yeah. in general, I would highly recommend that your end product is trying to get them to YouTube if you're going to be doing something that is a free stream to everyone. So if you're doing streaming, I would use Facebook as a feeder, not as an output. And that mostly has to do with your average view time is almost nothing. Like it's almost a worthless platform to stream to. Like it's almost, there's no the average view time from thousands of shows that we've done on YouTube is about 12 to 13 times longer than Facebook. So we're talking 28 seconds versus 6.5 minutes for average view time. So you're going to do much better on YouTube than you will on Facebook in real meaningful viewers. So, all that reach is just not worth paying attention to. Just ignore reach. Look for views over 10 seconds, and then views over 2 minutes. But you're going to see, and it's devastating when you actually pay attention to the actual numbers. That so the problem really is that I think Facebook's very powerful for driving people to YouTube. But I think that allowing your audience to get split and into a habit of watching things on Facebook is, now we're going to stream to Facebook as a test, but mostly what we're trying to do is pull them over actually to Mukana, but we're going to be using it as a feeder system as we stream out to that. But you want to, and really how you control that in a lot of ways, whether you're driving them to something like Mukana, which we're happy to make, I think we've made available to you if you haven't already taken advantage of it. You drive them to that site to ask questions. What we definitely do is ignore all the comments on any platform. We want to move people to where the comments are. That's where you want to, because you need critical mass on the comments and the voting. And so you want to move them all to one place, as opposed to, especially when you're small, if you have thousands of viewers, or tens of thousands of viewers on all the different platforms, you can think about taking care of everybody. But when you have a very small number, you want to get them all into one place. You don't want a bunch of people walking into empty rooms. A big room with 10 people and it feels empty. What you want is to take one room and start trying to fill it up with people to create that, kind of peer-to-peer, critical mass. And it's really hard if you stretch it over a lot of different platforms. You'll find that your viewership, I'll be surprised if your viewership without advertising, without paying Facebook for it, I'll be surprised if your numbers are significantly higher than YouTube. You'll just have lower average view time. So you're just getting less engagement. Next question.
Daniel McFarland in Belfast is up next, and he says, is Loopback the best software solution to add delay to sound output from a Mac, or is there a better software solution?
Go ahead, Jason.
I would say enthusiastically yes, if what you're trying to do is delay audio so that you can monitor it.
Well, and I think that you're actually talking about, though, you want to use audio hijack, right?
Well, and that was going to be my next point. Audio hijack can very precisely delay audio, and when used with Loopback, that's really the best way to go.
Because I don't think Loopback does delay on its own.
Doesn't do delay on its own, but it allows you to route.
Yeah, so you need to route it to audio hijack to do that. Next question.
Coming in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California, Gordon says, on a live show where the director and producer are remote, what's the most cost-effective way to handle IFB for the anchors and hosts or hosts?
Good, Courtney.
Well, as long as the anchor is stationary at a desk or something, and you did say cheapest, so I'm going to chime in here. These are two. This is the IFB I'm using right now. And there's two of them for a lovely $20, so $10 a piece. And you can run something like this for around $24, which is a headphone amplifier, distribution amplifier. You control individual levels. And then just get you some 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapters and maybe some 1/8 inch extensions. And you're in business for under $100. And they're I would not suggest wireless for any situation like that, because wireless tends to have batteries that fail at the inopportune moment.
Go ahead, Doug.
We use Unity Intercom for any type of remote, whether it's producers, directors, graphic operators. We've even had audio people. So Unity Intercom. And if you don't want to buy it, I know that there are several people among this group that have systems that can help you out.
Yeah, the most cost effective, when you said the most cost, when you're asking for the most cost effective, is to call them. You can do a phone out and just put them on a bridge. I don't ever do that, but I'm letting you know that that is the least expensive way to do it, is to call them and put them on some kind of bridge. Then I would say the next step up would be Unity Intercom, which we use a lot, and then the other one that we've used, which is significantly higher quality than Unity, but also significantly more expensive, is ClearCom. Using Agent IC in a mixture of the hardware that we use is highly effective, just a lot more expensive than Unity. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California, USA says, what's the latest troubleshooting technique that you've had to use, and what did you solve?
Go ahead, Jason.
I just yesterday had a Blackmagic Studio 4K Pro camera that completely died on me. So my very first thing was a multimeter, and just to check the audio, to check the AC output. And yeah, it's dead. DOA.
Go ahead, Doug.
So I don't consider myself a video professional. I consider myself a troubleshooter, because that's all we seem to do in live shows. We had a live show Sunday where we faxed out, tested out all of the things beforehand, hours before. And as the countdown was happening, 4 minutes to we were on air, one of the camera comms didn't just stop working. So it was literally texting on the phone to the camera op, try this, try this, try this. And you start at one end of a problem and you go and you just follow the path, whether it's audio or video or network. You need to start at one end and work your way back to where you can find, hey, it's good here, it's not good here. So troubleshooting is what we do on a daily basis.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just some of the most remarkable troubleshooting I've seen perhaps recently is it actually happens in after hours. You know, somebody has a problem, maybe they come in there with it, or it's something that's been discovered, and you just get this huge team effort and hive mind activity in trying to solve a problem, all these different thoughts and methods and, you know, different perspectives, and that really gets some stuff done.
No, absolutely. You know, for me, the biggest thing, as Doug said, the biggest thing that you have to do is remove all the variables, start adding the variables back in. I had a situation where I had my switcher stopped working, just literally stopped talking to the computer. So what there was to do is unplug everything from the computer, plug the switcher in, restart both of them, came back up, start adding things until it broke. It turned out putting 2 ATEM switchers on one computer, not a good idea. Just in case you're wondering, I've done the testing for you, and it has come up. No, don't do that.
I've made a similar mistake. So yeah.
It works for a little while. That's the funny part, is it works for a while that you're going, oh, this works, this is amazing, and then it stops working. It just gets confused. Next question.
David Brady in New York City is up next, and David says, any recommendations for 3D cameras? I'm working on an opportunity to film in an impressive New York City mansion while it's empty, and I need some advice on gear needed for a VR walkthrough.
So there's a difference in the question that you're asking. So there is 360 or immersive, there's 180, and then there's 3D. 3D, when you say 3D, for me, as someone who's done all of those things, I think you're looking for stereo. So stereo means 2 cameras that you're able to use. Now, if you're doing a virtual walkthrough, you probably can get away with either a 360 view, you know, so you don't necessarily need, you probably don't need and David, since you're here in the panel, what are you trying to, this is a...
Yeah, it's the Sunday place I go to. They have an annex building, and it's a big old mansion. We're currently closed to the public, and I'm figuring while it's closed to get a VR walkthrough of the space and use it as kind of fundraising introduction back to the public. So it might be more of that 180 dome look or something where
it is, although, you know, to do a walkthrough, there's a lot of, I mean, the fastest way to do it, you know, if I was just gonna go, okay, I just need to get something of it quickly, is I'd probably take the Theta Z1, the new Theta that's about $1,000, unbelievably fast. And, you know, like you can take one photo, it's like 5,700 pixels by something or other. I mean, it's very high resolution from one little camera. There's no stitching, and it just works. You can also do little things like because it's got an open API, there's iPhone apps that will run HDR cycles, so it'll do 9 exposures, from each one of those that you can then recompile if you want to rebuild those. And so from a monoscopic walkthrough, you could get that relatively quickly. And I will say that the level of effort after that goes up a lot, and I'm not sure, like it becomes, that I have those I don't know how many thetas I own. like I don't, they're super useful. I would say that after that, I would want to start, the other thing that you can do is rent something like a Faro 350 or a BLK 360. There's a place down in Texas that rents these, and the Faro will cost you $800 a day or something like that. And just scan it, and I probably do a bit of both. In fact, the Faro 350 has a setting, I believe, that you can put the theta on top of the Faro so that you can get the imagery data as well as the scan data. And I'll see if I can get a friend of mine on to talk about that a little bit. But those that'd be something that I'd probably think about, is renting something and scanning it. I wouldn't buy the Faro 350 is like, I don't know, $45,000. It's not something that you buy,
no.
but you can rent it for, and literally you can scan 2 hard days. You could probably scan the whole location, maybe even one. So, you rent it, you might get it for a weekend rate, or you might be able to do something else and spend 2 or 3 days scanning, and then get a bunch of stuff. The other thing to look at is there's another one that I just can't think of right now that it's like an all-in-one little that they use for
X4D something.
No. It's like I'll come back to it. It'll come to me as soon as we finish this question. But
okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, but those are some of the things that I would think I would if there's so many locations that have been unavailable because of COVID, and it has killed me that I've been busy enough that I haven't been able to I really would. I had a whole business model of like, let's scan all these locations, but the hardest part was closing them down. And of course I got busy doing other things. And so I haven't spent the last 2 years scanning locations, which would have been a great business. But let us know how that goes. Yeah, absolutely. Bill?
So I had a friend whose young fella in the family wanted to do some architectural photography. And the thing that drove us nuts as I was trying to give him some advice was the lighting in interior spaces. It could be very difficult, particularly in something like a mansion where people get this expectation that the shots are going to come out looking like Architectural Digest. And they send teams in there who are very good at painting with light and getting all the highlights of the room to show up. You walk in with a 3D camper or something like that, there are big windows and they're open and the room is dark because it's overexposed by virtue of the windows. So I would pay a lot of attention to a walkthrough, looking at the lighting in each room and trying to determine if you can use exterior, whatever's happening outside, to shoot as much as magic hour as possible, or to bring in enough light that is maybe over your head and generically omnidirectional so that you can bring up those rooms so they can really see how good they look.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to do this. This is actually a specific business that people have to create these kind of walkthroughs. In other words, creating hotspots and linking things together. For other people watching, you don't ever move your camera when you're doing these things. You're essentially creating, if these are stills that are connected together, or maybe stills that are put together in a timeline if you wanted to create a story. But I guess you're in the business of just wanting to capture it while you have access. So it's tricky. It's a whole area of expertise that you need to pick up. So you can get like the Panono camera, which is very old, which has a resolution of 16K, but unfortunately that 16K is the quality of the sensors isn't great, but it's 16K, and you can maybe rent one of those and check that out or do some experiments. Yes, but lighting is a problem. If people can look in any direction, the lights have to fit the environment.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have a Panono that was actually given to me by the inventor, like on the showroom floor, and I absolutely loved it. And then it was, sold off, and now the processing is nearly impossible. The opposite of what Bill said also works too, to some degree, which is just treat the windows to knock down the light.
The other thing you can do is, if you already have an SLR camera, and if you have a Canon camera, you can put a fisheye on it if it's a full frame sensor. And then you get a rig that what you need to do is pivot that camera onto around its nodal point. So the main thing is that you want to pivot it. The Nodal Ninja will do some of that, but you can also get automated versions of that. So Syrup which makes this little turntable that I use here, and Edelchrome also makes one that will hang the cameras over top of their nodal point. You have to figure that out exactly where it is. Usually it's a gold ring that you have to kind of figure out on it. Then you push a button and it'll start taking photos of all the exposures, and it'll just start running the camera. And so there's a variety of different tools like that. Using an SLR, you can potentially get very high resolution, gigabit, Gigapan. Gigapan is another solution for that, but you can get super high resolution of those locations. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Thing to watch out for if you do like the idea of 3D, 3D only really works, stereo only really works when you're looking horizontally. And if you're in a mansion, which everything is above 0 degrees looking straight ahead, then effectively you don't have proper 3D when you look straight up, because each camera is in the wrong position if you just rotate your head 90 degrees. So it's fine if I do that, but if as soon as I do this,
right,
then it's wrong. So you've got to watch out for that sort of thing.
I think I conflated 3D and
right. Yeah, immersive.
360 immersive. Yeah. But thanks very much for all the info.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if anyone had mentioned this. There's the Canon's new dual fisheye EOS lens. It's about $2,000. It comes out next month. It only works with some of the newer cameras. But,
for 3D, I'm super, it's a game changer. Like for 3D events and process. So not necessarily for immersive of building a tour, but for shooting a concert in VR, it's going to change everything. Like it's an incredible lens. It has me wanting to spend money on the camera just so I can buy the lens. And I've talked to some folks that are deep in this process, and they're all I sent it to one of my friends, and he sent me back a picture of it in his office. He's like, "Yeah, it's great. I like it." So anyway,
it only works with the EOS.
R5. Yep. Next question.
Next one coming up from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Where would XSplit fit into a production environment with OBS, or can it be a replacement for OBS?
I don't know if I know enough about XSplit to say. Anyone? No? I think you might have stumped us. I don't think we have a lot of... Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So the only thing that I can think of is there's certain features inside XSplit that you don't get in OBS. Like before we had virtual environments, they were doing something similar to that. I'm not up on the XSplit extras, but that might be a reason to have XSplit into OBS. Otherwise, it's just another thing that's going to bog down your computer.
Next question.
Next one comes from Jason James in Mesa, Arizona. And Jason says, for the most of the panelists, what webcams are giving you the best quality or camera chain and are making for the best image in this show? And it stops with especially, but I guess it got cut off here.
Go, Jason.
Well, I can't speak for most of the panelists, but I'm going to anyway. Most of us are not using webcams. Most of us are using cameras that are controlled through switchers. And, it's just been a lot of, little refinements. But as far as webcams go, Logitech Brio is certainly a favorite anytime any of us are remote. I've got to say straight away, the M1, the brand new M1 MacBook Pro webcam is spectacular in that it's just not terrible. Well, way to go, Apple.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think the Brios look great. I'm using a Brio, maybe not the best, but looks good enough for me. And then I know we see pretty good results with iPhones too, like the 10 and 11s up, something like that.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I just was going to say iPhones. That's all.
Yeah. Next question.
Juancy Robles in Mexico has a simple one. Is there a link for Alex's photogrammetry turntable?
So this is I don't know. I don't have a link for it, but I'm sure someone else can put it into Mukana. This is a Syrp, SYRP, Genie 2. And it is and I got the turntable. There's a turntable kit. This is the other part that goes on top of that so that you can put things on top of it. And I haven't, this week is going to be me playing with it. My maker pipe is going to take a little longer to ship because I ordered so much of it. And I wasn't willing to pay another $300 for it to show up quickly. So anyway, so I'm going to be working on getting this working over this week, and so stay tuned for that. But yeah, it's I think that it'll work really well. I've already seen a bunch of tests with it on YouTube. I've been watching lots of videos. And so that's the one that I'm going to use. Edelchrome makes another one. I also got one that's kind of a dumb system that just has a motor, and I'm going to play with using like the microbit to control it, just to turn it on and off. The big thing I'm trying to do is sync up taking pictures with the cameras with the turn. So it turns and takes pictures, turns, take pictures. And what I'm actually trying to do is set it up so that I've got 4 iPhones in an array that are looking down on the, on the turntable, so that I only have to turn it once and I end up with 4 rows of data. So that'll be something you'll see me kind of working through December. So we'll definitely, I'll be showing up in after hours when I get it running so that we can talk about it. But it's something that I think, again, I'm going to keep on saying that I'm very, very bullish on USDZ and 3D models for next year. And I would highly recommend keeping our eye on this opportunity. Go ahead, Marty.
So when you showed that yesterday, I got a promotional email from Salray Works, who is coming out with, they're announcing it at an upcoming show. It's not on their website yet. It looked like a puck to me, like very similar to what you had, but it's an NDI controlled pan tilt head.
Yeah, I mean, some of these do NDI pan tilt heads. There, Edelchrome and Syrup both make ones that they have pan tilts on top of these. So it's just, all of that stuff is available right now. It's just a matter of, so they may be coming out with another one, but yeah, they're definitely out there. And so I think that those are exciting for me. Once I start talking about pan tilt heads, I talk about a lot of money because I want it to really work. I haven't found anything under $1,000 that works the way I want it to. I'd love to be surprised. I just haven't found anything that wasn't quirky. I'm not asking this one to be to do smooth motion. I'm just asking it to get to a place over a very short period of time. So it's a different set of requirements for the photogrammetry than it is for the pan tilt. But yes, there's a whole slew of them that are available in this little space.
That's interesting. They claim this is the first ever NDI controlled pan tilt head.
It could be. It could be.
Which means you can program it to go to where you want it.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Because I don't really use NDI. That's not something I'm conscious to. So it could be. It definitely could be an NDI solution. I'd be a little bit of a blind spot for me. Next question.
Next one comes from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. When Rupert came into After Hours last night, everyone's audio instantly improved. What happened, and how do we replicate it?
What did you do, Rupert?
I actually don't know. I'd like to say I just have this effect on people, but it's probably something more technical than that. I really don't know. We'd have to. I wasn't aware that it had happened at the time, so I'm just wondering whether
audio got better after you arrived.
So I'm wondering whether it was something to. We haven't normally seen. Just the mobile client effect video, but it's possible that I came up here with my mobile client logged in and I logged that out at the same time as I joined back in here. So it may have been something to do with my phone leaving. I don't know. We'd have to replicate it.
When you join with the phone, are you joining with the?
I'm just joining. No, I'm just joining with the app, which I wouldn't expect to make any difference. But that's the only correlating thing.
Well, we have seen Zoom dumb down the signal for something that's less than. So it'd be interesting to know that the app in an iOS app negatively affected
in this case. It was an Android app, so that we'll just have to do some testing.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to test that. That's really interesting. Yeah. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego's up next. He said, could Guy discuss the sound absorbing panels made from recycled plastic that he was showing on After Hours on Monday?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we've been trying to find panels, and that's why I have these ones behind me. These ones are made, I think these aren't Arlex. I think these are Prime Acoustic. But anyways, these things can be a fire hazard. If somebody doesn't build them right, they can spread very quickly. So in institutions, they're really weary about this. And, you want them to be effective, but you also want them to not torch the place if it goes up. So we've been doing the research, and we found these ones by a local company called F-Zorb. And so yesterday and after hours, I walked into this room and it's dramatic. Like we had some moving blankets on the wall before, and then we put these things in, and they're weird when you hold them up because it's like weaves of recycled bottles. And the difference though of it just sucking up that sound, high frequencies and mid-level, I haven't really had a chance to test the lows, but just walking in there and talking, it's pretty dramatic. I'll put a link in the chat and you guys can take a look. It comes in all different colors, and a lot of Google uses this, Amazon uses this in their office buildings. So, because they drop right into the ceiling tiles up above. They're meant.
And who makes those again?
F-Zorb.
F-Zorb.
I'll put a link.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, real quick, I'm going to try to.
We talked about this a couple of times. Just those are closed cell, which is what you're looking for. We had a discussion of that. Closed cell versus open cell phone, and they're different. The phone they use for earphones and things like that, you want to listen through, that's open cell phone. Closed cell, and you can just tell the difference by putting it up against your ear and see if it diminishes some of the high frequencies or not.
Yeah. Next question.
James Babbitt, San Diego. Do Sony mini discs age like magnetic tapes, and would you send them to a specialist to copy them?
Good, Courtney, real quick.
Probably not. They don't age quite the same. They're not that old, so it's doubtful that the adhesion. The problem with tapes is the bonding agent that they use to hold the magnetic particles to the backing ages over time and lets go. I haven't seen that happen with many discs. Maybe there's someone out there who covers them. The main problem you have is the table of contents becoming corrupted, so you can't read them anymore. And look online, you'll find things that you can recover the table of contents if you can't read them.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, mini discs are different in that they scatter the data quite a bit. So it's not a linear read like a CD or a record. And I'm unaware of them really getting damaged. As Courtney said, it's pretty much the table of contents that can mess it up. I'll put a link in. That'll tell you everything you ever wanted to know.
Yeah, CD-ROMs and mini discs will, over time, can start to flake. And then once they start to flake, it's done. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. Newnan, Georgia is up next. As a follow-up to Alex's suggestion, should I push additional content to YouTube in addition to the regular weekly conversations with Tony Mobley?
If you have other content, I mean, having additional content, I wouldn't post, Jeffrey's probably more of an expert at this than I am, but I wouldn't post more than once a day. Let's go to Jeffrey and then Alex real quick. We're going to try to move through a couple more questions here before we get to the top of the hour. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the bottom line is focus on the main show first, and then if you've got the people and the cycles to do it, then work on creating content. And you can do the bite size, grab a question and put that in there. That would be more of a Facebook thing than it would be a YouTube thing. But follow what like the Tonight Show does, or Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel. See what they're doing and maybe try and copy that.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
What Jeffrey said.
Yeah, there we go. Next question.
The next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, what have your experiences been with stem mastering in the music world, i.e. summing and multiple stereo mixes of instruments and vocals and so forth, all to master a track?
Somehow we got to a Tuesday without, oh, there we go, Michael.
It depends on what you're doing. If you're sending out tracks to a producer that's going to mix them and master them, or it depends if you want to send out already mastered tracks to someone else. Like I think what you're trying to do, Douglas, is get the tracks out of Bitwig and put them into Logic for surround sound. That's my guess. So if you're doing that, then you want to go and run it through your mastering chain, run it through and bounce each thing separately, the separate tracks, and then you can put it into your Logic and do surround sound.
Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. You touched on it yesterday, but I was keeping my question for Audio Day. What does the panel think of the new Dji Pocket Mic, and particularly its claimed 250-meter range? I'm thinking of it to mic up a referee on a rugby field instead of using the Sennheiser G3.
Go ahead, Marty.
I think it's very interesting, and it may even hold some promise, but I wouldn't rely on it without some thorough testing, especially in a crowded stadium.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of move through this one. What I will say is that a rugby event would probably be the best solution for it because it's wide open. There's nothing in between. There's nothing there. So it has the best chance of actually probably working as long as you keep it away from a lot of other metal and other possible 2.4 sources. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan is back again with, is there any anyone using the iCan PT 1200 teleprompter the way I am with a phone as a camera at the back of the teleprompter?
I'm not using it as, I could probably test it. That's what I'm using right now. So that's what I have here. But I don't, haven't tried it with a phone. It should work fine. It's just got a mount that if you have a good mount for the phone, you should be able to put it in there. You'll just have to get it really close. I think that's the only thing, is that you may not be able to pull it close enough to the glass where the camera, you might have to figure out what zoom setting the phone camera has to be to not see the edges. But I'll play with it a little bit. I just have to check it out. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Can streams to LinkedIn Live be made private or unlisted? Also, any first-time tips for streamers to LinkedIn Live in general? And he's been granted access. Congratulations.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have it. I have LinkedIn Live on through Restream, and there is no way to actually change a privacy on it. However, if you're in a group that has privacy on it, then you'll be able to use the group's privacy to go from there. As for extra tips, stream and follow the rules, or else you're going to get booted really quick.
Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is interested in cables. Is there any substitute for the pluggable USB-C dual HDMI DP dongle for places that can't seem to purchase them? Another, for example, he says items cannot be delivered to your address.
Jason, real quick.
I can't speak directly to this other than telling you OWC has a very similar product that's Thunderbolt 3.
There you go. Next question.
Sam Downey in Bristol, England says, home security, Cove, Simplistic, or Simple Safe, or Ring. What does everyone like? Pros and cons, recommendations, please.
Jason?
Logitech HomeKit is the only doorbell I'd ever trust. If it's not HomeKit, no.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
This was Keenan's question, but if you're looking for security, either alarms or cameras, then you really want to, security is all risk-based and layer-based anyway, but you really want to look at the cybersecurity posture of whatever system you're going to use if it's cloud-based, and ultimately what your insurance company is going to favor that you have, and the Chiefs of Police Association for your jurisdiction. Ask them what is successful at stopping and catching, problems.
Yeah, I think that there's a cross use, that asking the police for it. The police want something different than you do. So I think you just got to be careful of that. The police would love us all to put Ring into what we're doing. So that's what, yeah, they spend a lot of money on my next door system telling us that we should use Ring. And I get it, but the pressure is makes me a little,
the thing is, you want when your alarm goes off, when you're not there, you want them to respond, and that needs to be from a credible system.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
I use the Arlo system from Netgear. Whoops. I thought I could pull it up, but I guess I can't. It's the joy of it is that it's all wireless. The cameras are wireless. The cameras are battery powered. Yes, you have to charge batteries and put them in, but if you do that, you don't have to string any wires, and the reach has been pretty good. I have one out in my carport area here that's about probably, I don't know, 10 yards away, so 30 feet, and it works fine back to here, and they're very easy to deploy, and they look really good.
I've had a bunch of Nests that I've used. I've kind of backed away from them based on some issues that they've had, not with me, but with other folks. And so from a security perspective, I do think that I think that there's a trade-off for security and privacy related to it. I think that if you're wanting to becoming part of making your whole neighborhood more safe, then the Ring is probably the best solution. So it's as it provides a backhaul to law enforcement, or it's very easy to do that. It just depends on what you want to do there. I wouldn't probably put anything in that wasn't part of the HomeKit, like Jason, at this point. I'm kind of not wanting any electronics in my house that isn't in HomeKit at this point. All right. we are now changing subjects. We've got a lot of comments and questions coming in already for the plugins. So what we're talking about a little bit, it doesn't have to be stuff that's for Black Friday. It just happens to be that Black Friday is where a lot of audio plugins get highlighted. So we figured this might be a good time for us to talk about audio plugins that we like. So this doesn't have to be, oh, there's a sale. We can just talk about the kind of plugins that we actually enjoy in general. It just happens to be that there's a bunch of them that are floating around right now. So we'll go around a little bit, but we'll jump into these questions pretty quickly. Let's just go around the horn and just see who uses what the most. Just one or two things. I know if we get to Michael, he could spend the rest of the show talking about it because he's got so many. But just pick the one or two that you use the most as far as plugins go in audio, and then we'll jump to questions. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I guess I don't use too many plugins, I guess, because I use Adobe Premiere Pro. And with the audio there, what I will do is I will just go to the audio area and then choose podcast voice, because that best suits for what I do. And then I make small adjustments from there on EQ plugin here and there. And then, of course, the WLM meters to just check the overall sound.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I'm a huge fan of Isotope RX. In fact, their entire line, they are expensive and they are absolutely worth it. If you get 10 seconds to just talk or listen to the CEO talk, you will understand the brilliance behind those plugins.
Good, Michael.
I'd have to say Weiss, WEISS, Weiss plugins. They were originally $300-400 each, but that's a deal, believe it or not, because these boxes, the Weiss boxes used by mastering engineers, are $6,000 to $10,000, and they've taken the exact code line for line from the box and made it into the plugin exactly the same code, computer code, that they used for the boxes. And you can get the Weiss compressor, which is just stunning and clean and clear and musical, and the Weiss EQ for mastering, and I use them all the time.
And that's Weiss.ch. Does that sound correct? I see some equalizers and so on and so forth. I don't see any software, but it's
the software is available from SoftTube.
Okay.
Softtube.com.
Great. Go ahead, David.
Not really too many of them. WLM for home. That's about it for me.
Yeah. Courtney.
I find the Glade plugins help eliminate the musty smell in the house, but I don't use plugins.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I use Final Cut. So it has a ton of Logic plugins, and the Logic plugins have always been clean and do a good job on all the basic compression limiting and all the rest of the stuff I do. I do use the Universal Audio Apollo Solo, and I have a Manley Vox box in the chain for that runs my microphone tune-ups. So,
go John.
My plugin is called Mickey. That's my best plugin that I have.
It's an incredible plugin. It does an amazing job at audio cleanup. Go ahead, Marty.
So I use Studio One mainly, and I use the Ulian meter a lot. I use some other analysis for stereo separation metering. But what I find I get the most use out of is the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, which is a wonderful compressor to use on both tracks and on the mix bus. And I found a couple of new ones that that are worth mentioning from Eventide, the Split EQ, which I'm just starting to play with, and it's really different. And a Rezo from Mastering the Mix, which identifies resonances and just takes them out automatically.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Tony, do you use any plugins?
It's funny that you asked, Alex. I was just texting Sky. I was saying I was about to leave because I can't contribute to this conversation because
you totally
I know nothing about plugins.
You don't have to know anything because you'll bring stuff up. So stay with us. Stay with us. It'll be great to be part of the conversation. Don't leave us. This is the hardest part. I just decided to go around robin. I don't know. As soon as I started doing that, I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. But anyway, go ahead, Sky. Do you use any plugins?
I've been gifted the Loopback adapter, and I know that. So the short answer is no.
That's fine. Yeah, I think that for me, it's always been mostly cleanup. So mine are, the RX tools and Synaptic Unveil are the tools that I probably have used the most outside of like compressor equalizer, that type of thing. So I do a lot of basic stuff with stuff, but then the only real plugins that I go into are things that I feel like I need to carve something out and do some real surgery. So those are mine. Let's go ahead. I think that we have quite a few questions that have stacked up. So let's go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
So I was in error.
Yeah.
Because I am using Audio Hijack and Loopback.
See, there you go. That's see, you're using them. All right. Let's jump into the questions.
Sam Downey in Bristol in England has our first one. He says, can we list all the Black Friday 21 deals on the Office Hours Discord, as this would be really handy? I've started to add a few there for plugins. Any more deals on tech would be fabulous.
Yeah, it'd be great if we just create some list somewhere. I mean, what we probably could do is post deals in general. So that might be something for Chad to put in, of not necessarily Black Friday deals, but great discounts where we see something that's sizable that we want to just let everybody else know so that we can swarm it. so why don't we see if we can put that up in the next day or so, and then we'll use it for Black Friday, and then we'll see if we just see, it'd be a good place for us to put, there's 30% off of this, or if you want to get a free expo ticket to IBC or NAB, here's the promotional code. That kind of thing is a place that we kind of save those things up. Yeah, Jeffrey, you can do that. They kid up. That's the idea, is to draw people in. So we pass them around all the time. So that's the so anyway. So those will be good.
That's over on Discord.
Yeah.
Our classified
We
section?
should put not a classified section. This is a sales section. It's a good deal for us. Don't put classifieds in there. Just put in, hey, I saw this. This is 30% off. I think it's a good deal, and hopefully people will be appropriate with that. We'll find out. If they aren't, then we'll take it away. So, all right, let's go into the next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, what plugins would you prefer for mastering? I've used Isotope's Ozone 9 on the final mix, but I'm interested in a plugin for finishing submixes or stems particularly.
Go ahead, Marty.
So mastering encompasses a lot of different processes for different purposes. It does tonal balance. Everything is already mixed, but tonal balance, and narrowing or controlling the dynamic range, and making it at appropriate volume, and dynamics also. So a couple of things I'll point out. There's the mastering, the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, which is multi-stage compressor that does lots of different things. 2 stages of dynamics controls, plus it does stereo widening and other things. Then for a more multifunctional, there's the Brainworks Master Desk, which does compressing and limiting, and has several different modes. It does tonal balance. It does MS processing, which is a whole other philosophy of how to manage dynamics and tone. Then in MS, which is mid-side, so you can process the middle of the stereo spread differently than the left and right extremes. Brainworks, again, has a mastering processor for that. And then PSP AudioWare just came out with a new mastering processor that has multi-bands of EQ and several other stages.
Go ahead, Michael. Oh, can you hear us? Michael? No, we can't hear you.
Looks like your Zoom mic is muted. We've got a red symbol.
Sorry about that. I'm going to share the screen here and show you what's on my master bus right now. It changes, but it currently starts off with the Weiss EQ. And can you see that, I hope?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the Weiss EQ. And this just has a little cleanup here, a little bump in the mids and highs, and a roll off on the bottom. That's a really nice EQ, as I mentioned, for mastering. Then I go to the glue, and this adds that SSL type of of glue to kind of glue the whole production together. And it really does a whole lot to give you that SSL. I don't know how to describe it. They call it the glue. The glue to kind of put everything together in your song. Then this is one I mentioned before to Alex, the Abbey Road mastering chain. And it's just awesome. It's just fantastic. I'm just starting out with the mastering preset. There's tons of presets in here, and you can go through and try them all, see whatever flavor you want. But I just start with the mastering processor. And then go ahead.
I'm always amazed that you know, of all the things in the world that we see on our computers, the most skeuomorphic that we ever see are audio plugins. Like they've taken it to skeuomorphism to a whole different level. It's like perfectly rendered. You know, this is a dial, and it just so speaks to, you know, this kind of making sure that folks that are coming from the analog world feel comfortable in the digital world, and making sure that, oh, I understand what that does. You know, people like me just want a nodal compositor with a bunch of sliders, and but it's all like all laid out. It's when I look at plugins, I'm always amazed by that. It's quite, I wonder if there's like one company that builds all everybody's, like most people's renders.
It's fantastic. It is.
Yeah.
And Leapwing is a really great company. I think they're out of Belgium, and they have mastering quality filters. So you can choose down here, master quality, low latency, ultra quality. And when you go to mastering quality filters, you get, it's a multi-band compressor is what this is. And it goes through and then kind of evens things out. Vitamin is made by Waves, and I like what it does, adding in overtones and adding in harmonics, and just kind of brings things to life a little bit. But it's the subtle use of Vitamin. You can really destroy a recording by over.
Too many vitamins is bad for you. It turns out everywhere. So it's you know, it can be
too many Flintstones kills you.
Yeah, exactly. It's great.
And this is Fab Filter Limiter, and it has up to 1632 times oversampling, and really gives you a tremendous limiter. So just for overs, I have it set at 0, just for overs. And that's currently what's on my mastering chain. Now you can see these are the drums, these are the bass, and all the plugins. And here's the Shadow Hills that Marty was talking about. I use that on my drums a lot. I can go through individual instruments. I could show you all my plugins.
Yeah.
What would you like?
Good. It's good. I think we'll come back to it. If we run out of time, we have a lot of questions lining up, so we're going to go through a couple more questions, and then we'll have you keep on just adding them in as we go through it. It's great. It's fantastic. Next question.
Matt Sloan in Phoenix, Arizona says, what plugins are recommended for voice enhancement? I've been making do with the built-in plugins in Final Cut and Premiere.
Go ahead, Marty. Oh, you can't hear you, Marty.
Thank you. There are a few things that can go into vocal enhancement. It can be taking out excess sounds and noises, or it can be enhancing certain frequencies, or it even can be adding distortion to add overtones to bring out the vocal that can cut through a mix. One of the tools that I use is from a company called Noveltech. It's called their Vocal Enhancer, and it allows you to focus in on a set of frequencies and create resonances, both low frequency and high frequency. It gives you a lot of control, and you can listen to it in solo and dial it in, and it works. It works really well.
Go ahead, Bill.
Coming out of radio for all those years and the rest of that, there are things that do cutting and there are things that do enhancing. I've kind of always been a believer that I don't like to enhance too much. I'd rather cut. I usually cut for room resident frequencies and things like that. But what I want is the voice that sounds like the person who's actually speaking. And some people just don't have a ton of bottom end in their voice. I mean, if you have nothing below 500 hertz coming out of you, yes, there are synthesis programs that can reimagine those and put them in where they're not. But I'm not sure. I kind of always feel like that's cheating a little bit. Basically, I try to keep the voice as normal sounding as possible. In radio, that's probably the result of the fact that there was so much compression in the radio chains that I learned on in my early days, because they do a ton of compression just in the studio, and then the transmitters were always really brick wall compressed because they could get fined if they went over power going out. So you had that very much in your face radio thing that people try to reach for. And to me, it sounds really kind of unnatural and unreal. So I'm just more a fan of trying to sound like yourself, just really clear.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Bill said it beautifully. For those of us who have done radio enough in the past, you don't want to talk like this, okay, Bob? Like that kind of ridiculous. Just speak clearly. Nobody who's in front of a mic doesn't loves their voice immediately. You just get used to it.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I use just to share again. Sorry. Because I wanted to show you a really cool feature on Nectar. I use mouth declick from RX. I use noise from RX. And then to start off the channel, I'm using just the Waves SSL plugin, the brand new one that came out, to give it a little character. I'm not changing any EQs or anything. I'm just running it through. And but here's the plugin I wanted to show you. Was Nectar, made by Isotope. It has built-in AI, and you can choose then, I want this to assist, and then I say next, and I can choose vintage, modern, or dialogue, light, modern, or aggressive. I'm just going to leave it at the default and say next. Now it says it's waiting for me to play audio. So I'll play audio here. So the artificial intelligence is going through and deciding if it needs a de-esser, if it needs EQ, if it needs a gate, and all of these different things, and automatically I'm going to accept what it did, and here is the result of what it did.
And you're coming in really quiet now that you played that, so I'm not sure if you changed the chain at all.
Yeah, that happened yesterday. Sorry about that.
No worries. And what's interesting about that is that it's not just doing something automatically that's closed, it's changing all the settings so that it just gets you close. So then you can go back in and make more additions to it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes from Fjorn Banwell in San Diego. And he says, learning to use Resolve 17. I'm wondering if there are particular audio effects which are essential as add-ins. Ripple sent an offer for new training on built-in effects for 40% off for the Black Friday stuff.
Go ahead, Jason.
Motion VFX has recently started their own Resolve, and yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I would, as anything that Ripple puts out for 40% off is going to be worth buying. It's worth buying it at retail. You definitely want to know what you can do with the plugins that come with the app, because a lot of times there's lots of plugins that will do much of what you need. So I would highly recommend it if you've got the time to sit down and go through those videos. Ripple's the standard when it comes to learning how to do these things. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. What would you consider an essential plug-in pack for clients who want to improve the sound of their live presentations?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
You want to get a compressor, you want to get an EQ, and perhaps you want a teeny bit of delay or reverb. And there's so many different companies that make each.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, compressor, limiter, EQ. When you say presentation, I'm assuming you're meaning speech, right? So there's a difference between different way of processing speech than there would be for processing music or music vocals. It would be a different chain. It would be a different goal for processing speech. So there is a great deal going on right now from Black Rooster, or I think Michael actually introduced me to last week. You can get every plugin they have for $99. It's like over $1,800 worth of stuff. Actually, you can get it for $85 if you sign up for their newsletter. You get $15 off of that. So I bought it. It looks like a great deal, and it looks like they have some really nice stuff.
The only thing I'll say about plugins, and this is something that we see often, is if you're trying to have the first things to do for your presentation is make sure they have a good microphone, make sure they stop saying stop using lots of text in their PowerPoint presentation. Those things will make more of a difference than any small amount of adjustment that they make to their, and the only reason I say that is because there's a temptation to add a bunch of things to something before we handle the core issues that are problematic within that. Is that, if they can solve the real problems of making a great presentation and making it, interactive with the audience and have great audio, a little bit of compression and limiting is probably all they need. But definitely they can do other things. But we just want to be careful of putting, lipstick on a pig. Next question.
Well, it's pretty close to the last one. JHB in New York says, what are the recommended standard plugins to get started with? I think we've covered it pretty well. Do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, there's so many plugins like I've been to show, but the Abbey Road Studio Pack from Waves is just excellent. I keep recommending all the different plugins separately, but the Abbey Road Studio Pack will give you really good sound, really good sound.
I mean, the two things that I would say are the two plugins that are standard on almost every thing you'll have that I would master are a compressor and equalizer. But not like, oh, I know how to turn it on, but I truly know how to use it. If you totally know how to use them, especially a multi-band compressor as well as an equalizer, you're going to get more, in my opinion. I mean, someone can disagree with me. In my opinion, those are the two most used things that I've used in the last 20 years are those two things, and mastering those and getting to really understanding what each dial does and how I take advantage of it and where I'm carving down and what I'm leaving behind, and all the other things have been the most important skill sets that I've had. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, that's really important, is understanding what each of these things do and what the goal of it is. And so we're talking about all these individual plugins, but I don't want to forget that, especially when you're doing just speech like a presentation, a channel strip, a good channel strip will encompass mic preamp, compressor, equalizer, limiter, and maybe some other things, all in one unit, and it's a signal flow that flows through it and is specifically for one microphone that can really just be very easy to use, but be very comprehensive as well.
Absolutely. Next question.
Sam Downey in Bristol, England, up next with who uses Native Instruments plugins. GR8 Black Friday deals on Complete with a K, 13 Select. Use this code SELECT21 on checkout for more than 50% off.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I used Native Instruments, but I don't use the plugins, and I want to talk about this really quick because there's another way to use plugins, and that is to bring in different types of things, samples, effects, and stuff like that. I use that all the time. IK Multimedia has a whole bunch of plugins that'll bring in their Moto series will bring in bass lines, they'll bring in drums and stuff like that. Native Instruments has a whole bunch of stuff like that. I also have a plugin from a program called Band in a Box, which allows you to create a song, and then you can bring the individual stems into whatever DAW you're using to create a backing sound for maybe a live event or something like that. Have some music playing to your show and things like that. So plugins can be more than just fixing the audio that you have there, it's also accentuating the whole video or audio stream.
Well, I have to admit, seeing that the complete 13 is only at $200 is it's a thing. Like there's a lot of, I'd pay $200
It's an impressive deal.
Just for the African one. I'd probably pay $200. So that's impressive. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, they're very good. I've been using them for years. They were just bought, or they bought Isotope, and it's two companies now, or one, and they have tremendous plugins, and the bundles are amazing, and they sound great.
I will say that we are a bunch of very expensive friends. That's all. This is going to be a very expensive day for me. All right, next question.
Sam Downey's right back from Bristol, England, and he's got a link there. The Plugin Alliance will be announcing their Black Friday 21 deals soon. Great plugins, including some fab SSL consoles. Anyone using these?
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, Plugin Alliance is great. I've been buying stuff from them for years, and they're not only do they send out discount coupons all throughout the year, but when it comes to the end of the year, they will do like any plugin for $29, and that's how I got the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, which is like a $400 product for $30.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas, our friend, comes in and says, why is it so common for audio plugins to be skeuomorphic? Alex's question from earlier.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Nostalgia. It's just
and I think
people,
it's again
nostalgic. You look at it, you understand it. Audio engineers have been reaching for those devices for 50 years, 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, because you're emulating an analog device usually. You want to tie that back to the analog device. So I think it actually helps you believe that it's making the sounds of that analog device more if it looks like the old analog device that you were used to using.
Steve Jobs would be very disappointed in the audio industry.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and there's also this thing like, for decades, oh gosh, if I could just have LA2A compressors, I could make things sound better. And you go through years and years and you can't afford these esoteric, highly prized, talked about for the audio nerds things. And then suddenly here you are, and for $100, you can get an emulation of the sound of that thing that you desperately wanted to get a hold of all through your youth. So there's just an emotional connection, I think, for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. The hard part you always have is that you have this middle of the market that is all of your business, and it's just so hard to get out of that into something new, into something that is because the folks that are there are the ones that are spending money on it. They make money on it. They know how to make it, and they want to be comfortable with what they're doing, and they want to understand that. I've had this discussion with audio companies for a long time because I think that when you look at like a BSS 806, the problem is it's too expensive and everything else. I mean, for general use, but what I want is just a nodal compositor for audio, which is that I have a bunch of IO. I just start adding inputs. I have a bunch of inputs and I have a bunch of outputs. Then they all go out of that, and then I just have nodes that I just add, and I just sit there and process it. I'm absolutely certain that it's and using the BSS, I'm 100%, 1,000% sure that it would produce better content, faster, easier, and no one will do it because they just say no one will use it. Like people will, audio engineers will look at it and just not dig in, and so no one will build it because, that engine, because they just don't think anyone will use it without the little dials. It's an amazing conversation I've had with many people. Jason.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is an analog synth, but for audio. Oh wait, that's what it is. I don't know.
Well, digital synth. I mean, but the idea is that it has all the same stuff. You just randomly, exactly the way a nodal compositor works. I've got a bunch of sources. I've got a bunch of outputs, and I've got nodes that control it all. I
kind of love that idea.
It would let you do things like the things that we do in nodal compositors are not possible in layers. Like you look at After Effects and you're like, that's cute. Like it's really cute that you think that you can do that there. But once you're used to a nodal compositor, you're taking this output and wiring it into a control over here that has nothing to do with it, and you're building these very complex brains to process stuff. But every time I bring it up, they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, except no one would use it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know if this relates to the skeuomorphic thing, but what you're talking about, Nodal, is one thing to remember is that digital signal processing errors happen, and algorithmic errors and rounding errors, things like that, and they're cumulative. So when you're putting all these things in sequence, you're adding.
We have the same thing in video. Like it's definitely a problem. But the big thing is being able to concatenate. So what you do is you can build something up that's very complex. It doesn't do every process all the way through. It looks at what was the delta between the beginning of this and the end of this and concatenates that into a single calculation. And that reduces a lot of the error that you would have otherwise. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, Sam mentioned mixing audio for video in Logic Pro. I've always thought of Logic Pro as a music-centric DAW. How do you set up Logic for post?
That's a good question.
I didn't understand his question particularly.
Well,
what do you mean by setup for post?
Well, if you have audio, say a bunch of audio tracks in Final Cut, what's the round trip to Logic to do the post and then bring it back to Final Cut if you wanted to do that? And I think that is a second hour. So just hang on to that thought, Douglas. Someone should put it in the second hour. We should get some folks together and really build like a little. I'm just going to table that one because I think that us walking through that one, that's this whole second hour, and someone should put it in the second hour bin, and we'll get to it because I think that the round trip from Final Cut to Logic would be a really good thing to discuss. Maybe we can get the guys in Ripple to come up and talk, join us, and some other folks that do a lot of video to Logic to back. I will say I'm a proponent. Like I just use Logic for everything because even though I don't do a lot of music. If I did music or if I want to do something, I just want to be comfortable with the interface. So even if I'm doing simple things, I just don't want to try to be figuring it out. Next question.
Sam Downey in Bristol, England up next. A great tip for audio when working in Final Cut Pro is to buy Logic Pro and mix your audio in that, since Logic can import a video file. Of course, you can then mix it in Atmos 2 now. Great plugins from Logic straight away.
Yeah, so we're gonna do something there soon. So we'll find that and we'll plug that into a Tuesday sometime in the near future. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What is the actual definition of plugins for those that don't know who are listening?
Hey, go ahead, Sky.
My original introduction was in the Photoshop world, and I know you knew Mr. Knoll personally, Alex. So it's, from my experience, is you get a basic software package from a manufacturer that does the thing that you want it to do. And then there were these ancillary magical features that you wanted to add a little nuance, a little twist, a little spice, a little thing. So I think they're the digital spice of the meal that you're cooking. And I know I'm metaphoring, but it's stuff that the manufacturer sometimes start to let you do, but they didn't have the time and they needed to ship the big package out.
It's not even not having enough time. It's that you're better off. The best solution is always that someone builds a core application that is extremely stable, that does what 90% of the people need to do 90% of the time. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else, and it just keeps getting better at that. And it keeps on, there's this challenge that companies get into of chasing after every request that every client has about how to do something. And they want this, and they want that. What you want to do as a company is not get caught up in that rat race. It is build a great SDK and a great API for plugin manufacturers or a plugin structure. That's what we do here, is that we have all these, the types of plugin structures. By creating that standard, Logic doesn't have to write every plugin. Apple doesn't have to build those things. And so the thing is that you want to have them stick with that core application. Does it run well? Does it run fast? Does it do all the basic things that you need it to do, and then allow the plugins to add on top of all of that, all of those things? Like if you look at a great example is Blackmagic, Mix Effect Pro and Here to Record are adding all kinds of features to the ATEM that Blackmagic doesn't have to think about. And Blackmagic has no interest in going into that business. Like they're like, how can we help you? Because the thing is there's a limited amount of engineering. We think that, I always think this is incredible when you see conversations like, wouldn't these hire more programmers? Like they're growing on trees. Like you could just go find more programmers. Like in this world, there's a reason that there's a Grove for Google. and Apple is putting out stuff for elementary school kids, it's because they're out of programmers. So if they were good programmers, they're hired, like if they're, and so I think that's the problem is you want to keep the limited resource that you have focused on the core pieces and allow these plugin manufacturers, because they'll do it better. They're passionate about compression. They're passionate about this. Let them, sort that out. So I think it's more than them running out of time and more of a great, like it made Photoshop what it is. My understanding of the relationship is that what it allowed Thomas to do is work on the core of Photoshop and work on how does this work as an architecture without having to fulfill everything that John needed for visual effects. Like John had this thing, I need this, I needed this, I needed this. If you ask Thomas to do all of those things, Photoshop doesn't get done. So Photoshop gets to do those things, and John gets to fix the things he needs today. And that and they built that interrelationship so they could make that work, from my understanding.
And that interrelationship, I believe you referred to as an API. If you could quickly define that,
application programming interface,
because that's that conduit that the main manufacturer is making so that these other side things can plug in. Correct.
And really what makes it powerful is how deep it goes. How deep does that, what access does it give you to grab onto? And the deeper and more powerful the API, the better the plugins can be, and the more they can do. Go ahead, Tony.
I just want to say thank you for the definition.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely.
Great answer. Thank you.
Absolutely. Marty?
When we're talking about the audio side of things, we're generally, in many cases, emulating physical devices that were used when we were all analog, right? And there are so many different types of compressors and so many different types of EQ, and all of those different things can have been modeled to try and copy the way they sound and the way they work. The way they detect audio, the way they affect the compression or gain reduction. And then there's the interface, how the human manipulates these controls. There's so many different ways to do that, from very beginner, simple interfaces to more advanced interfaces. And what the plug-in architecture enables these manufacturers to do is to extend the feature set of any core program with all these different emulations and all these different types of different processes that, and like you said, it frees up the manufacturer, the core application manufacturer, from having to worry about these and all the different ways of doing them. So it really is a cool thing.
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I think everybody's covered it pretty well. I came to it from the idea of my microphone normally has a cable, but in the early days, somebody invented this wireless transmitter plug-in. I could plug it into my mic, and my mic was suddenly wireless, and it had a receiver on the other end that eliminated the wire. That kind of simple, on a mixing console, we don't have tape delay. Well, let's get a tape recorder and plug in a cable out to the tape recorder, then plug it back in the other direction. And now I can do tape delay on the channel of my mixer. It's those simple outboard capabilities that you can plug into the basic unit.
Good, Courtney?
Yeah, I like it too. Like the car market, you buy a basic Chevy Nova and you want to customize it for your particular driving habits or your taste. There's a whole aftermarket of people that manufacture mud flaps and, little add-ons to your car that you can add on. It's a whole
spoilers.
Spoilers. Mud flaps, everything.
Volkswagen spoilers.
Not like seeing a Honda with a spoiler.
But it lets you tailor. Plugins let you tailor the product to your particular taste and your particular application, and it doesn't have to come from the manufacturer. It evolves into a whole collection of aftermarket manufacturers that can glom onto one particular item.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole world. I've owned used BMWs for 3 decades, and it's the world of aftermarket for a BMW, because the BMW keeps it pretty simple, and then there's just thousands of things that you can get for your BMW to do that. And especially good when they're old, because you don't feel bad about adding them. So because that's all. I never buy a BMW that's newer than 5 years. Next question.
Comes from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. He says, what are the panelists' opinions on Slate digital audio plugins versus Waves?
Go ahead, Michael.
Rock and roll. When you want some rock and roll, you want to go to Slate, and they just have tremendous plugins that are. Steven Slade is a tremendous drummer, and he has a lot of drum plugins. But his idea was to bring the thousands of dollars of technology that musicians don't have access to and put them into plugins for everyday people. And he really did a great job. Now, so it's a flavored plugin as opposed to Waves, where you can get both. You can get the Abbey Road Studios, which are flavored, or you can get the Waves clean plugins. It all depends on what you want.
Next question.
Tim McCullough in Kansas City, Wichita, Kansas, not Kansas City. Where do plugins come from, mommy? Differences between sampling vintage and esoteric units versus creating new processing from scratch.
Man, I think that's such a great market for both of them. There is I am an engineer and I want it to sound the way I knew how to sound. And that's where I think a lot of that skeuomorphism comes from, is that I've been using this thing for 30 years as a piece of hardware. I just want it to do the thing that I was doing before, but I don't want to have the hardware anymore. And so I just want that thing to be over here. And I think that's why, again, skeuomorphism in analog, in plugins or analog software is at a whole different level. It's like the NFL versus, baby league, of all other interfaces when it comes to skeuomorphism, because it looks amazing. But I think that that's where you see the most skeuomorphism. And then what's incredible is when people start thinking outside that box. Like, we're not looking into the past. We have a whole new way of thinking about this. And I think that and some of those haven't survived. There was a plugin that, and I can't think of the name of it right now, that was used by sound designers in the 90s, that you could paint the sound. So, if you think about the, and maybe someone can remind me if this has come back up again, but it kind of disappeared. It was this tool that you could take an image of you could take the data from a spectrograph or spectrogram and bring it in Photoshop and literally edit it and put it back. And it wasn't good for fidelity. It would do all kinds of weird things to it. But for sound effects, wow, blurring spectrographs is cool. Anyway, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, when a hardware engineer and a software engineer love each other very much, that's where plugins come from.
That's the best line.
Hall of Fame answer there.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, Sky. We're just gonna let.
Well, that interface that you're talking about, I've seen that effect in the Adobe Audio Suite, and they have that feature that you physically take a paintbrush over something that looks ugly, and it kind of does a magic thing to it.
It's not quite the same, but it is. I mean, it does the thing. It does select it. It reminded me of that when Adobe came out, but because you could do those things with what the tool, but I just can't think of the name of it right now. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, has anyone ever used audio transport plugins like Source Connect?
Go ahead, Bill.
And yeah, it's widely used in the voiceover community and other remote studio operation communities to send audio back and forth, particularly around the world and things like that for collaborative work. I will say this, for decades, you couldn't hardly be a voice talent without having your own ISDN line, and they would bring in particular things like the Telos Zephyr, and you'd connect it to an ISDN line to get the lowest latency possible and to be able to work remotely. The fact that the internet is growing so fast and its speeds are increasing, and you get things like, gigabit lines to people's homes, a lot of that old stuff is kind of going by the wayside. And honestly, I haven't used any of those services for probably the past 7 to 10 years. And it's so fast that what we have just in our regular houses, I mean, even my 300 up that I'm downgraded to since I moved and I don't have my gigabit line anymore, I haven't had a single problem in delivering a digital file, whether it's a voiceover or anything else. It all goes up smoothly and conveniently, and I just don't see the barriers there. So I am less interested in these specialist transport things because the world of digital delivery has just gotten so much better in the last 10 years.
The big thing for us is that we're using them for live events. So we're actually using we'll send 64 channels. We'll send a video stream to a location with 64 channels of audio. They'll mix the whole thing down on a huge panel, re-embed it, and then send it out to the stream. So that's so for live is what we're really paying the most of the attention to. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Bill covered most of it. Source Connect was originally created to replace ISDN modems and still use the internet, which has multiple nodes that you're moving through rather than point to point. And they did it by QoS encoding and using certain robust protocols. But it's just a means of connecting in a reliable way to send live digital audio, mainly audio, but now I guess video, without dropouts or
go ahead,
delay.
Jason.
I actually have one of my favorite and longtime clients who still has a recording studio and still has an ISDN line, and they keep trying to take it away from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Next question.
Next comes up George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Is there a day or time for audio workshopping in after hours?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'd like to take a verbal or a visual poll here. All in favor of Marty teaching the class? Okay, well, but Tim also in Wichita would be really awesome because of his union experience. The third issue is we're at different levels. And so we kind of need a 101 basic theory. We also need, what would it be audio in a house of worship? What would it be in a live Zoom experience? What would it be as a teacher?
Well,
so
and I think
that
those are all possible. And I'd love to have Michael to talk about how he constructs things inside of Logic and what he's putting together. And so I think there's a lot of labs that are available. I think that the real issue is who's going to take them on. So I can tell you that I took on 3 days a week doing Isadora with Andy, and that's hard. It's doing that 3 days a week for an hour. It seems like a little thing, but in the middle of my day, I'm like, oh, this is a thing. So anyway, I think we need to think about who's accountable for it, who's going to make sure that it actually happens, and then I need to know about it by Friday. So right now my goal is for the following week. I just need to know if you ping me on Discord and say I want to schedule this in. I'm 100. The reason I want to schedule it. I mean, we do random things like, Manolo was showing off PTZ controls at 5 a.m. this morning. I could hear everybody talking while I was making coffee, and I walked in. I was like, "What are they doing?" And it was amazing. They're building interfaces and running cameras, and anyway, so it was so that a lot of the stuff happens organically, inside of office after hours. I would love to schedule it. My goal is to get to a point where we only schedule 1 hour a day, but there is an hour a day somewhere in the day, and it can be at 5 in the morning, it can be at 6 o'clock in the evening, it can be whenever the person who's accountable wants to do it. So they can decide how many people they want to make it available for and where they are in the world and everything else. And then we just have people, just people know about it. And I'm happy to promote it. I'm happy to put it in the little newsletter. I'm happy to talk about it in the announcements. I'm happy to do all those things to push those things forward because I would love to have that. The thing that I'm thinking about right now is that eventually, if that proves to be successful, we would slowly open that to 2 a day, that are happening in different parts of the day. But we wouldn't want them to be closer than 3 hours apart, so so if someone, as we start to schedule them, I don't want them back to back. I don't want to overwhelm people with suddenly there's all this stuff, to do. But right now I think that we've been doing it organically. I do think that we'll grow into it. In the standard after hours, I mean, there's going to be some point if we had, we don't have this right now. So every time I say this, people project immediately and think that the world's going to come down. But anyway, if there were 1,000 people coming to after hours, we would have lots of rooms with lots of labs happening all the time. And we would have to give up the fact that we're just not going to be at all of them. There's ones going by all the time, and there's a growing group of people, and there's a general discussion area. My goal is always to have any room. I feel like the rooms for live video where people are talking should be about 50 to 100 people. So when we have less than 50, I feel like we shouldn't make it more busy. If we have more than 100, I'll think that we should start subdividing. So those are the kind of the math in my head of doing that, is trying to make sure that there's enough critical mass to have it all work, and so anyway, so that's the process. But I will say that the after hours labs are like a lifeblood, because a whole bunch of people show up and then they hang out for a little while longer. So it's a really great energizer for it. I think that it can be an energizer that burns everybody out if we're not careful. So that's why we're not going to do a whole bunch of them. But one a day on different subjects, totally into it. So just ping me and we'll start figuring that out.
We need a workshop on life and work balance.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back in with, what do you think about Wave SoundGrid and similar offloading technologies for plug-in processing? I personally have a SoundGrid studio system and love it.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. If you have an older computer and you need to get lots and lots of Waves plugins running, just simply get the SoundGrid. The only downside is you have SoundGrid has its own application inside your DAW. And so you have to put the plugins into the SoundGrid and then it interfaces with your DAW. But no, it's tremendous.
Next question.
Lou Perez in Phoenix says, these plugins are all for mostly DAWs. I am guessing. If you are a newbie and want to add compressor and EQ to a live stream setup, what DAW is best to get started and to add these plugins? Apologies if I'm getting this wrong.
That's a great question. Go ahead, Michael.
I am hoping you're on a Macintosh. And if you're going live, then I would use Audio Hijack. And Audio Hijack shows your plugins and it has some built-in plugins and then plugins that you own. And you can add those in and do that into your live stream.
And go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to answer this a little bit differently. It is very hard to do better for a live stream than just straight up ATEM Mini. The Fairlight Audio will teach you how to use a compressor, especially if you're willing to just listen back to yourself. You've got EQ and compression, and it works.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael said, would using a plugin like Audio Movers be useful in a remote mixing pipeline? I think that a dedicated audio transport app could have better sound quality than relying on Zoom.
Yes. I mean, using a dedicated system, whether that's Unity Connect, Studio Connect, Studio Connect Audio Movers, I think. And did we have Audio Movers on? I thought we had Audio Movers on the show. Maybe we had a different one, but we should get them on. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles says, other than EQ and compressor plugins, what third plugin does Alex recommend to learn and use?
RX. like if I was going to say the RX suite at that point, like after those two, I would just add RX into it. It as an all-purpose, like if you're going to buy one thing, I would say that suite has solved so many problems for me over the years. It's I'd have a hard time giving that one up. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles is back with any recommended YouTube videos or channels that will help to hear and learn and master audio compressor plugin controls.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't have anything in specifically, but what I will say is that in the olden times, the internet wasn't really nuanced enough to be able to be used to teach some of these things. It's gotten so much better that really there's no excuse for not being able to have, a live compressor lab where you can hear the differences between things, or of course a pre-recorded video. But it's so much better than it used to be. I can remember early on thinking, God, if only there was a way to share this where you didn't have to be live. And now we're way past that, way past it.
Yeah, I think especially when we solve the minor instabilities within Zoom related to, like, if someone calls in, we lose all of our quality and stereo and everything else. So if we fix that problem, or Zoom fix that problem, so many labs that we can do here, and especially if Zoom would incorporate 5.1. so then we could, then we could really play with being able to hear things. I think Mickey proved that we could do binaural when the stereo is working. So there's some possibilities of us doing some interesting surround as long as we have a processor that'll fold it back down to binaural. Go ahead, Michael.
There's a really interesting plugin by Clevergrand, and it's called their Corv processor. And it actually is a pictograph of what happens to the sound as it's being compressed. And it's really well sought after by teachers and educators.
What's it called?
And Corv Pressor. One word. KORVPRESSOR.
Well, I can't even find that.
Yeah, it's
K.
K.
Not C.
K is catch up.
Interesting.
And I would also recommend Mac Pro Video. MacProVideo.com has a huge Logic and DAW and great videos on compression.
Yeah. The core pressor. That's interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting one. Go ahead, Marty.
Learning how to use the controls on these plugins. If you go to any of the manufacturers or the distributor sources that we all listed in Mukana, all of them have videos that introduce and show off how the product works and what the controls do. And it's a great source for just learning basic stuff. Even if you don't end up buying that processor or this processor or that plugin, you'll learn a lot just from watching those videos.
Yeah, I was trying to find some of the more of the music ones because I do Mix with the Masters is a really good YouTube channel, in my opinion. I learn a lot from there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, besides YouTube, LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com, has a ton of highly instructional courses on, you can see them on compression, digital audio foundation, audio mastering techniques, multi-band compression, working with compressors, etc. And these are, some are only 10 minutes long, some are 2 or 3 hours long, exploring each of those topics. It is a paid service or a subscription service, but there's a wealth of information and training videos there.
Yep. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia is up next. He says, after hours labs, if they're ad hoc, then it could be posted in Discord. So he's looking to support this idea of us doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're like, hey, we're doing something. I think someone posting that to Discord inside of I think we already have an alert, an AH alert of like, hey, we're doing something that you can put in there. So that mechanism already exists. You'll get more participation if we build it into the schedule. I'm just, we can definitely do ad hoc of like, hey, let's just jump up and work on something. And I've done that with Andy and other people, like just jump, like Charles one time was going to show me some color correction stuff and we were talking about it and we were like, hey, let's just jump into after hours and do it. Like that way everyone can see what we're working on because it's opened. So that kind of thing think makes sense. When we actually want a bunch of people to learn it, then I think that scheduling it, going through the process of scheduling it 1 week out makes a big difference. The key is that what we want to do is invest knowledge in the entire group as best we can. So the more methodical we are about that and giving people a little bit of warning that it's happening so that the people that are interested, there's currently about 7,000 people in the after hours mailing list that have said, hey, I want to be contacted. So there's a lot of people there making sure that they all know that that's happening so that they can show up and be part of that process. It doesn't mean that all of them are going to show up. It means, but it might mean another 10 or 15. It's not just people that can add to the conversation. It's people that will learn from that conversation and then take it somewhere, and that's what we want to keep on trying to find opportunities to do. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, do you think it would help if there was, and I'm tearing a page out of how to make a podcast successful. Even now, possibly early, if we had a regular lab time and we just said, we're going to, there's going to be something, kind of like what you guys were doing with Isadora. Like, I can't remember what time it was, but I remember you'd always pop in the middle of my afternoon. It's like, oh, okay, they're doing their lab thing.
Yeah, I think that 2:00 is really good for me, but I think that there's
that's 2:00 it is.
No. So but the problem is that I think that one of the things we've been looking at is should we do labs at 9 a.m. right after this so that people are already here and everything else. But I also think we have to be sensitive to the fact that there are people all over the world that are part of the group, and by enforcing a certain time, we're gonna, no matter what time that is, someone's getting up in the middle of the night if they really want to do it. So I think that allowing it to float around, like right now, I think that, to your point, I think that pushing them into something when we have too many, I think makes sense. I think right now no one's sending me emails about next week yet. So right now I'm going, hey, whatever you want. When we have too many people sending me emails, I'll go, hey, why don't we do this all at 2:00 in the afternoon or 10 a.m. Or there's probably a discussion about what that time is. That is the best time. 2 is probably the worst time, by the way. I've thought about it a little bit because it cuts out Europe and Australia at the same time. Like it's like, so it's probably not the best one.
I think my point is, if it is a specific time,
people
whatever
know that
time
something's happening,
people will know. Oh, right. That office hours group. Yeah, they meet every Tuesday at noon to talk about audio or whatever it is.
And I am thinking about I'm having some considerations about doing it inside of a breakout room for the labs, specifically because we can record them. Like we go to the breakout room and record in the breakout room as a lab. Like we tell everyone we're recording, record that, and then make it available to people. Like the lab is like if you join the lab, you can be part of that, and we're going to record it and make it. It probably won't put it on YouTube. Like we'll probably put it somewhere that is less public, but still archived. Because I think the labs have been pretty deep. Like there's been a couple of those Isadora labs that I walked out going, I really wish I had recorded that. Like it's just, like there's a lot of some serious, mind bending, but when Elle and Tlaloc and Andy start going back and forth, that's when I think that like, I'm not going to remember all this. There's some serious science going on here. Next question.
The next one comes to us from George Butters, again from Halifax. Best way to connect an XLR mic to the ATEM Mini's HDMI inputs?
A little bit more of a general question, but does anyone want to field that? I think you just need an XLR to Mini adapter. Go ahead, Courtney. Oops, I got the
well, into the HDMI inputs, if you have an old camcorder that has XLR inputs in it and has HDMI out, that would be one way to do it. You're subject to the preamps that are built into that camcorder, and so it has to be, maybe a Panasonic or a Sony. If you have older camcorders, that's probably the easiest and fast way to do it. There are embedders that have XLR inputs on them as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would do a serious deep dive to find a Sound Devices VHS camcorder with an XLR input and noise assist. Okay. If you could find that, it'd be awesome.
Good, Bill.
Just real quick, remember that XLR mics come in two flavors, dynamic and condenser. If it's a condenser, it's going to probably need phantom power. Right. So you're going to have some way to boost that signal up to get it into the system.
Some kind of preamp. A great one is an MM1. The Sound Devices MM1 is a great way to process your mic into into something out. It's great preamp. Next question.
A. Mitchell's in Washington. How has no one really delved into the discussion of in-the-box versus external or out-of-the-box mixing? It's fundamental to any discussion of plugins, as it's about how, when, and where, and why you add these things to your signal or not.
Go ahead, Michael.
There's big debates about it, of course, and a lot of it has been solved both through A/B testing on gearspace.com, and through A/B testing, people are trying to tell the differences between the plugin and the hardware, and they're unable to tell the difference. So right now, the plugins have gotten so good and are using the same code, like I told about the Weiss hardware, that they're using the exact same code from the hardware, that it's indistinguishable. It is nice to be able to be in the box because you have total recall of your session, and you can edit things over many days or years, and you can send it to other people, and they can load in the plugins and adjust things. So in the box is very good and very nice, and it's just a different way of working. I can't say one is better than another.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, another question is, how much space do you have? We're talking about using physical devices instead of code plugins. Some of these physical devices can be thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. But when you're sending to those things, you're coming out of your computer. You're converting from digital to analog, going to the device, then coming back and converting again from analog to digital, and so you have latency concerns and transcoding concerns,
generational loss,
and generational loss. They are fabulous devices, and if you're in an analog workflow, then absolutely stay analog and go to these devices if you can find them. There's a company called Vintage King, where a lot of these physical devices, a lot of them are historical heritage devices. They're still around, but they're really expensive, and there are not many new ones being made that I'm aware of, except there are some. There's a chassis called a 500 chassis. It's a small lunchbox with slots in it, and you can buy different cards that you can plug into them. They're called 500 cards, and you can get them from a couple of different manufacturers. They come with mic preamps and compressors and different things like that. And they're designed because they're portable, and you can take them to a gig with you if you want to.
Right. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael again. He says, how do you compensate for analog to digital and digital to analog transcoding latency when using external hardware synthesizers or processors?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Time machine is really the only way to do it. You can't remove latency. The only way you can deal with it is to add latency of the other things that you need to synchronize to stay in phase. So you'd have to add another box that delays whatever it is that's running through D to A to D that's giving you any amount of latency that's causing a phase problem.
Next question.
The last one in our regular group today is actually more video. It's Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia is back with any tips for reducing moire from background LED screens.
Go ahead, John.
Only one thing to say about that.
That's more.
Okay, so I have a request. I'm just going to put out there is the next song from the remotes we should rewrite that song about moire and put it together. I'm just telling you, the biggest hit the remotes will ever do is a fun track about moire. I mean, like if we figure out all the lyrics and everything else, it will be massive.
Tell Grant to start his crooner training.
Yeah, exactly. It would be so good. Anyway, so it's a little video, so I'll answer it relatively quickly because it's not really part of our second hour. But the main thing that you deal with moire is the frequency of that moire. So it's not just getting rid of it. I'll tell you all the ways that we do it. Number one is we get an LED wall with a finer pitch. So getting that LED wall as you get closer to something like 0.7, 0.9, these are really expensive walls, but they will make it much easier. As you go up towards 2.5 or 2.4 or 3.2, those kinds of things, you're going to end up with a lot more moire because the gap between them. So, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the millimeters, the 2.4 mil or 2.4 millimeters between each light that's on the board. And so as that increases is where you're going to start to see that moire. And so you want to, the other thing you'll notice is that as you start to zoom in, the moire will show up in certain zoom points. So the moire doesn't, it's a frequency issue, and it'll be different based on the gaps between those lights. And so you can find the zoom angles and work around them. That's something we have to do often. The big other ways to do it is, number one is get that pitch down to be a more manageable. Number two is move the subject away from the screen. What you want is a better depth of field. The softer that depth of field is, the shorter that depth of field is, or as it, not even the shorter the depth of field is, but as it drops off, as soon as it gets to a point where it's no longer truly seeing the even like little humps. If there's even like a little bit of a hump between each node, it will moire. So it has to be completely blurred out to make that happen. In fact, if you watch Mandalorian, before I understood that Mandalorian was using LEDs for the first episode, I couldn't figure out how the bokeh looked that way. I was like, they must be doing some kind of effect, because I could see this weird thing going on. That's the moire really out of focus, so it was still there. And so you have to get that short depth of field. Now, the other ways to do that is to use a larger sensor. So 2/3 inch sensors are almost impossible, to use in front of an LED wall. So you want to go to they can be, but then you really deal with those focus issues. So then you want a Super 35 or larger sensor. Larger than Super 35 is hard to use in live production. So you have a deeper stage, larger sensor size, and then you can pay attention to focal lengths as you get closer. As you zoom in more with those two things, that depth of field shortens, and then that screen behind you will fall behind. Those are the things that we found that we've dealt with it a lot. Like, this is definitely something that has been to the point where we try to get people not to use them. We're not always successful. Anyway, there you go. So thank you to thank you to the fine producers who asked a lot of great questions. Great conversation, as always. And thanks to the panelists. That was a great conversation. There's a lot. I think this is the record for the number of things that I saved, the number of links that I saved. I was like, what is that? And what is that? And what is that? And so I save all those links myself, the ones that I need. So really, really well done by the panelists. So thank you for contributing and coming in every day or on Tuesdays to contribute. I really appreciate it.
And all of those links will be over on the Discord chat links.
Perfect.
Also, at the end of show 609.
609. Yeah. So very, very well done. All right. We've got, again, think about the second hours. We're going to be brainstorming the second hours on Friday. So do think through that. A couple weeks from now is kind of like is becoming the prototypical of what I hope to do with second hours. Not next week, but the week after. And so we've got some great folks, but I'm trying to fill in December really densely, so just to kind of experiment with how far we can push that as we get ready for the new year with the new broadcast system. All right. Jumping into after hours.